Okay, when I was first asked to give a talk about developing my research agenda, I was both excited about it and humbled by it as well, because if you notice among all the speakers today, I'm the youngest. In terms of the number of years since my PhD, I'm not sure about the actual age, because some of you look so young, distinguishedly young. But I thought I didn't want to go through a similar process as the others, because you could read all about my research projects and my research publication on my website. So I thought rather I should describe how I got to where I am. And as a geographer, I will use quite a bit of imagery, and I would like you to go on this journey with me. What I do is not rocket science, and it's got nothing to do with the price of rice, but it's important for our students. I'd like to talk about my research journey really as an aspiration, like climbing a mountain. So this was a photograph taken from my holiday in the Swiss Alps in June last year. And as I look up, I realized that it might be quite impossible for me to get close enough to the pinnacle of my research career, in a sense, because I've got bad knees. And so I wasn't very keen on climbing, but somehow I am reminded that if I try hard enough, maybe I'll get there. And true enough, I got there, and at the peak of Jungfrau in Switzerland, I saw this beautiful view. But I must admit, it was serendipitous. It was really because there was a tram that takes you all the way to the top. You don't have to run. I would like to describe my experience in developing my research agenda as something that's serendipitous. It is serendipitous that I have some kind of a coherent narrative after all. So for those of you who have gone to my website to look at what I research in, you know what I'm going to talk about. Like directors say, if you know what I'm going to talk about, I don't have to talk about it. But for those of you who don't, my research area has focused in the last few years on climate change education, how teachers teach and how students learn about climate change within geography. So how did I get here? I like to describe my journey with a timeline. These are important moments in my a journey and how it might look like some years down. So by looking at what T65 would be, you can guess how old I am. I got my PhD in 2005 in the area of web-based learning in the geography classroom. Before that, I did my master's work on the urban thermal climate of Singapore, which looks at the urban heat island phenomenon, how the built-up areas in Singapore is about 3 to 4 degrees warmer than the rural countryside. Yes, there were still some patches of rural countryside then. The study was since replicated by colleagues in NUS, and they found a similar difference between the urban and rural areas. That was very exciting work, but I thought I had to do something that matters. And of course, being an NIE, what matters would be how do we teach children, students about geography. So my doctoral work, which ended or kind of like culminated in the PhD in 2005, was how students learn using the web, learn geography. And from then, I kind of did what most people did and worked hard towards tenure. But I put tenure there not as an end goal, but rather, for me, it was a very formative exercise, because I had to write that case of what my research is. It was when I was forced to sit down and write my dossier, and I began to realize that what I was doing was starting to fall in place. So from about 2005 to 2011, if you look at my website, I've been publishing patches in technology and education, about geography learning, about climatology, and they all seem to fall into different places. So I started thinking, what does that mean? And of course, this is where I am now, and how has it shaped? I'd like to share with you that while I first started doing my work in climatology, it is situated within the larger discipline of geography. As an applied climatologist that looks at urban climate, one of the things that I think, like what Rita said, was concerned is how do you communicate it to people so that it matters, that it makes sense. And of course, I'm also an educator. So how do I see myself? I was publishing in areas all over the place, before tenure, and I was trying to put together a compelling narrative of sorts. And then I realized that, well, maybe I was really doing that. So I have so many things that are going on. Perhaps it can be described in what David Lambert, one of the key geography educators in the field, talks about in geography curriculum making. And that is for a child in school that goes through a learning experience, the way they teach is informed not only by the learner's experience, by the way the teacher selects materials, design the curriculum, but also informed by the subject disciplinary matter. So all these things seem to fall in place, and more importantly, it must be for something. And over the last few years, I have been shaping it towards climate change education. So based on this experience of mine, I have a couple of reflections I wanted to share. I really didn't want to talk too much about what are the different types of projects I've done, but rather what have I learned from them. So some interesting points along the journey for us to think about. I didn't think that was a science or even a craft to how you could develop your research agenda. I didn't really have a formula. And I think it's kind of like what the other speakers were talking about. It happens serendipitously. Something led on to something. But by the diversity of the examples that we're sharing today, hopefully you could pick something out, and from the reflections that we have, think about where you are at in terms of your journey and how to move forward. This will certainly be a reflective point for myself as well. So some of the points. It was lucky, I was very lucky to be able to balance my personal interests in terms of what I think was important in research, the institution's interests, the state's interests, and the global community. Because I work on climate change, it affects everyone. For me, it is important. For the institution, it's an area that we can't ignore because it is in the school's curriculum. So in science, in geography, it is a big part in the curriculum. It is the state's concern because we ratified the Kyoto Protocol and because we are committed to reducing our carbon emissions. It is of interest and importance to the global community because it is a problem for all. So I'm so lucky. And I also wanted to develop a research agenda that matters. Not only because it is in the curriculum in schools, but because this is a big agenda on, for example, UNESCO's Decade on Sustainable Development Education. So these are things that guided my serendipitous journey, as it were. I think another point that I wanted to reflect on was that my entire journey was not one that was cast in stone, and it wasn't planned right from the beginning with a particular path. There was a goal, but along the way, there must be some flexibility for you to change and move along. There was this switch after tenure to focus very much on climate change education because I thought it was important that I did something that matters to what I do. And I did this switch because a lot of people helped me. I talked to a lot of people. I remember my previous head of department in the AG was always hounding me. What is your niche area? What are you doing? What's your niche area? And of course, those who know him knows that he sounds like that. And I also had the privilege of talking to mentors in the international community. So these things all helped me in shaping what seems to be a rather serendipitous journey. So with that, I'd like to say thank you, not just to the audience here, but to all the various funding agencies and all my collaborators and my colleagues on the research team. Thank you.